Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me today in my craft room for some Christmas inspiration. I'm using the Beachy Christmas clear stamps and I've already stamped and colored with my Oh Hoo Hoo art markers. I did some hot foiling with the winter big scripty words. I also embossed a sentiment and die cut it with a banner. I did some die cutting and also used some old gingham paper for my hammock. I'm creating a beach scene, so I have different scene dies to create my sky and my ocean, as well as my little sandy island and sun. And of course, I will have everything linked down below. I just wanted to show a quick little overview of all of the different dies that I used since I did all of my die cutting before I started filming. As I build my scene, I know that I want to add a little bit of texture and some splatter to my images, and these are completely optional. If you're recreating your scene, you definitely could just use the die cuts as is, but I wanted to add a little bit of depth and dimension, and I love a good splatter on my card. So I'm starting with my beach, my sandy beach here, and I'm using the color Vintage Photo in Distress ink to add in some depth to my sand as well as my palm tree die cuts. And to add splatter, I'm just squishing some of that ink onto my glass mat, and then I will grab my water sprayer and a paintbrush and I will just flick on the paint to my trees as well as my beach. I thought the color was a little light, so I'm also going to grab walnut stain and do this same process of flicking on some ink color to add a little bit more a darker color texture. I wanted it to look really sandy. I also am bringing in my white ink spray. This is from Avery L, and I'm just adding some white splatter to give like some highlights and lowlights on my sandy beach. I'm going to repeat almost the exact same process onto my water. This time I'm using Uncharted Mariner, and I'm going to splatter that onto my ocean scene, and then I'm going to bring back that white ink spray again because I think water has, again, low lights and dark lights, how the light hits it, so I wanted it to have a splatter both of a dark color and a lighter color. For the next part, I am adding some ink to my sky. I'm using tumbled glass and I'm just going around the edges, not trying to put on too much color because I don't want my sky to look super dark. And then I will splatter on the same color tumbled glass ink. And then I'm going to bring out my Starry Colors pigments, and I'm using the white color here, the metallic white, to splatter on to my scene or to my sky. For my sun, I'm using dried marigold, and then I'm also going to splatter on some more of the Starry Colors, but this time I'm going to do more of a yellow gold from that collection, so my sun has some great yellow gold shine to it. And that will be all of my splattering, but I still will add a little bit more color to some of my other die cuts. They're going to be a little smaller, and I just didn't think it was necessary as the bulk of my card is now splattered and has all that texture from the ink. So I die cut my hammock out of some soft red or a pink colored gingham, and I'm using lumberjack plaid to add in some dimension, but I am making sure to tap off my brush before I apply the ink so it's not too dark. I didn't want it to be, super duper red on top of a paler red paper. And then finally, I'm using pine needles to add in a little bit of depth to the tops of my palm trees for some dimension as well. So now that everything is splattered and it's drying off to the side here, I'm going to start assembling my card together. I'm going to be doing an A2 card, and I'm doing it horizontally. So I'm going to start by gluing my sky to the top front of my card. I am using a sturdy tape gun for this part, and I'm going to adhere it again using the corners as a guide to glue it to the top. Now, I didn't want my card to be really bulky with all the layers I had, so I did use a wavy die to create my ocean scene, and then I also cut off part of my sky and my sun, so that way it wasn't terribly bulky on the bottom of my card. And I'm going to overlap my ocean just a tiny bit on the sky portion of this card, so that way you can't see the seam and it just looks like the water paper is layered on top of my sky, but it removed some of the bulk. If you have questions on how I did this, I can definitely do this on a future video, but I just lined up my die to make sure that they would match up when I run it through the die cut machine. So now that I have my sky, I glued down my sun pieces as well, and now it's time to add the ocean. I used my wet glue for the sun because I knew it needed to line up with the same wavy cut as my sky, and I didn't want to risk tearing anything, so I use wet glue as it gives me a little bit of wiggle room. But I brought back that sturdy tape runner glue for my ocean, except I did add a little bit of wet glue where it will overlap my sky and sun piece. And there you can see those pieces fit together. And I'm going to cover that little part that is on the bottom with my sandy beach because I was planning to pop that up with some foam adhesive anyway. But before I add in my sandy beach, I wanted to get the rest of my die cuts assembled and glued on because they're going to be a little bit more in the background of my card. So I'm gluing my two hammock pieces together. I added some dimension with the ink, and when you layer them together, I just think it looks really cool, and it looks very 3D to me right now. I'm also going to glue together my two palm trees, so I'll add some glue to the tops of my tree trunks and glue them to those palm leaves at the top. I think this die also comes with coconuts, but I decided not to do them because the scene is already going to be pretty busy and very colorful, so I just went with the treetops and the tree trunks, even though my colored in palm tree does have some coconuts on there. But that's just a side note. You're more than welcome, obviously, to add coconuts to your trees if you're replicating this card, however you like to see your palm trees. So now that my trees are glued together, my hammock is glued together, let's create a little scene and put them together. So I'm adding glue to the knot part of the hammock, and I'm gluing that to the top of my tree. So that way it looks like my hammock is tied onto my tree trunks. Once I have one down, I'll just repeat that same process to the other side. I'm also trying to kind of angle my trees so they look like they're, bent a little from holding on to the hammock. And I think that looks really cute. And I want it to be just behind my sandy beach here. So I'm going to grab some foam adhesive squares. These are little tiny ones from scrapbook.com. And I'm going to cover the whole entire back side of these die cut images, and I'll peel off the release paper. Now I want to, like I said, put it underneath my sandy beach, but I want to make sure I have it high enough that I'm not, putting it too low and most of my tree will get covered. So I put my little beach die cut there with a magnet and then adhered down my trees. Before pressing down too hard though, I just removed that sandy beach and then really secured those die cuts behind my island. And before I adhere my little beach island die cut, I want to kind of figure out my layout for the card because I knew I wanted to do actually a little bit more die cutting on here. I have this little die set from Fawn as well called the Sandy Beach Accents, and I wanted to die cut two little openings on my beach so that way I could tuck in my pail and my shovel as well as that little shell present on the right. So I grabbed the smallest one, and I know that I want it to be on the left to be able to slide, like I said, my pail and shovel in there. So I am going to use some mint tape to keep that in place and run it through my die cut machine. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I try to make them look kind of equal for away from each other and kind of the same spot on both sides of my beach, and I'll be able to tuck in my images. I remember that there were a couple stamps from that Beachy Christmas stamp set that had that same kind of look of the sand. So I also am grabbing some Pinecone VersaFine ink and stamping a few of those on the scene as well, just to give a little bit more texture and dimension to my background. So I did a couple of the small ones and two of the larger ones. So now that that is ready to go now. It's all stamped and die cut. I'm going to add it with some foam adhesive to my background. So I know I need to make sure that my sand goes all the way to the bottom of the card. So I added some foam strips there, and then I'll flip my beach scene over, and I'm going to add foam adhesive to the sides as well as along the top of my beach, making sure to leave some gaps where those palm trees are going to be tucked in just behind my beach. So I'm going to line that up to the bottom edge where my foam adhesive is on the background and secure that down. Now I'll start adding in my stamped images. So I'm going to start with my pail and shovel as well as my seashell gift, as those will slide nicely into those little openings that I die cut. I'm using some wet glue to attach those down. I'm just going to press lightly, slide my image in, and then secure it to the sandy beach background. After I have all three of those in, I'm going to start building more around it, like my little sandcastle here. I think the lights are so cute on this sandcastle, so festive and fun. I'm adding foam adhesive to where it will attach to the ocean background part of the card, and some wet glue where it will overlap with the beach sandy part. I glued my little stocking to the surfboard and I added that. I actually tucked it behind the sand so it looks a little bigger, like it's further away. And then I'm adding in my cute palm tree, Christmas tree with the hanging ornament. I've got my Santa here with his cute little Hawaiian shirt. And of course, he's holding his little tropical drink because he's having a good time here on the beach for Christmas. I have one final little present, a little pineapple that I am putting under the palm Christmas tree. For my banner sentiment, I'm going to adhere it just below my images. So I'm adding some foam adhesive a little lower on the strip so that way I can overlap it just a tiny bit with my images, because I definitely had a limited amount of space down there. And then I'm going to attach my Be Merry foiled sentiment. I foiled it with red Glimmer Hot foil from Spellbinders and then use the coordinating die to cut it out. And I'm going to add foam adhesive towards the center of the sentiment, so kind of behind the M-E-R area of my Be Merry sentiment. And then I will peel off that release paper and I'm going to do my best to center it on the card, and the edges of the sentiment, so the B and the Y, they're going to overlap with the palm tree tops. So I will attach the center part to my card base, and then I'm going to use my tweezers to delicately lift up the ends of my sentiment, add some wet glue, and glue those to the tree tops. I wasn't really sure what exactly would overlap once I got it on, so I glued the center first and now gluing the ends of my sentiment. That will pretty much wrap up my card, but of course I got to add a little tiny bit of bling. So I'm grabbing my glitter pen, or sparkle glaze, I believe is what it's called, from Fawn. This came in my Hive 5 kit, and I don't use it a lot, and I think it's starting to dry out a little, so definitely need to be better about using it. And I'm adding it just to the lights on my sandcastle and my palm Christmas tree, and I'm using my little pin just to kind of help spread it around. And that finishes off my Christmas card. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was inspired by the latest Lawn Fanatics challenge to create a scene, and of course Craft Roulette, the last episode, which I'll have linked down below as well. But I hope you enjoyed this little fun Christmas scene and it inspires you to create for Christmas as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!